Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing fantastic. So we're continuing our reading of Fredrick Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I like to read this book because it gives you something else to think about. You argue with the text. You begin to become familiar with him on a deeper level. And when you hear people speak about him and they have not actually read his works, they've just read quotes on Facebook that might be fake or other places, you sort of can see how they've misconstrued or over romanticized him, or maybe even not heavily criticized him enough. So, by reading his works, we actually become more familiar with who he is on an individual level, which helps us to have a deeper understanding of who he is as a writer, as a thinker, and whatnot. Let's begin. And now lead of his guilt lies upon him, and again his poor reason is so stiff, so paralyzed, so heavy. If only he could shake his head, then his burden would roll off, but who could shake this head? That's interesting. So, poor reason, that's really stiff, it's paralyzed and heavy. So it's really a malfunctioning, essentially. What is this man? A heap of diseases, which through his spirit reach out into the world. There they want to catch their prey. What is this man? A ball of wild snakes, which rarely enjoy rest from each other, so they go forth singly and seek prey in the world. Now that is a very unique example. A ball of wild snakes not getting rest from each other. Because if you ever seen a group of snakes that are all tangled, how would one be able to hold still in that? They're all moving. It's like it's a mosh pit, a tangled knot of serpents. So that is a very unique way to describe somebody. Behold this poor body, what it suffered and coveted, this poor soul, interpreted for itself. It interpreted as murderous lust and greed for the bliss of the knife. Notice these things here. Murderous lust, greed for the bliss of the knife. Greed. It's like to hoard it. They really want to feel that euphoric feeling of the knife. Murderous lust. That's pretty scary because lust already can get you into trouble. So having one be described of having and possessing murderous lust, it's like a double pronged assault. Those who become sick today are overcome by that evil, which is evil today. They want to hurt with that which hurts them. That's a very interesting thing. People spreading around their pain, hurting the others how they were hurt themselves. But there have been other ages, and another evil and good. Once doubt was evil, and the will to self. Doubt was once evil, he contends, and the will to self. The will to self. Now remember, he's really all about people gaining mastery of their will. So it's interesting that he's mentioning it here in a different context. Then the sick became heretics, or witches. As heretic or witches, they suffered and wanted to inflict suffering. Now this is unique because a heretic is somebody who has gone against their teachings, right? And a witch is someone who wants to subvert goodness with malice and who is trying to possess some ability, some power over the control of affairs, right? Trying to be able to influence the destiny of others, right? Trying to surpass the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So their doubt, a heretic gets doubt and then starts making up his own dogma. I know one particular person who I follow who claims to be a Christian, but consistently spouts anti-Christian ideals, mocks dogma, mocks their traditional scholars, and blends in, aka does bid'ah, innovation, in his own faith. And he rightly is a heretic, and he gets mad when people call him a heretic, but he actually is, by any standard. By any standard. So the doubts that he had led him toward his sickness in terms of the heretical way of leaving one's pure faith. When you are in your pure faith, you are not sick. Most religions feel that the stricter you follow it, the more pure you become. The more astray you become, the more sick you become. So by him saying sick and became heretics, he has a point there. And the witch does the opposite of what a nun would do, or what a devout imam would do, where you're guiding people to avoid talking to Lucifer, Iblis, Shaitan, you name it, right? But a witch attempts to speak to demons, jinns, otherworldly entities, interdimensional beings, tries to make pacts with those entities. So she's had doubt, he or she. A warlock is for men, and a witch is for females. She's had doubts, and has therefore decided to take matters into her own hands, and the darker the deals she makes, the sicker she becomes. So she has a very clever and succinct way of compacting these complex ideas in what he just said. But your ears do not want to accept this. It harms your good people. You say to me, but what matter your good people to me? Now that one is a very tart line. But what matter your good people to me? Dang, that's like something like a conqueror would say or something, you know? Much about your good people nauseates me. Oh, that's funny. And verily it is not their evil. Now that is interesting. The good nauseates him, but the evil does not. Now, what does he mean by that? You can take that twofold. On the surface, but when some people are claiming to act good, and they're actually acting really bad. So, sometimes people can be overly puritanical in a way that they approach people that comes off really turning people off and making them resentful. And that person thinks they're being good, when in reality they've kind of had a good intention, but their delivery of such thing was off the rocker. So somebody being more passive and correcting can be seen as doing an evil because they were not as active in it. And in reality, it was actually more palatable to someone. You could take that one sentence and really have a fun time nerding out on it. So you can read that in the nihilistic way, or in this sort of charitable interpretation way. Indeed, I wish they had a madness of which they might perish like this pale criminal. Verily, I wish their madness were called truth, or loyalty, or justice. But they have their virtue, in order to live long, and in wretched contentment. Wretched contentment. Now that one is almost like an oxymoron. Because when you're content, you're not wretched. But to him, their contentment is wretched. You know? There's something clever going on there. I am a railing by the torrent. Let those who can grasp me. You're a crutch, however, I am not. Thus spoke Zarathustra. Now this is very interesting right here. A railing in the torrent. A torrent is a storm. When you're trying to walk down some stairs, you grab onto the railing. Like if you've ever been to visit a lighthouse and you're going down some steep steps, it's wet, and you need to hold on to the railing so you don't slip and go boop, 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 boop down those stairs, right? A crutch is something you carry with you and lean upon and cannot walk without it, and you need a crutch, rain or shine. Whereas a railing in the torrent is serving you a guiding purpose through the storm, while a crutch is with you excessively and you are desperate to it all the time. So it's a very different thing between being a railing and a crutch. He's calling himself a railing. That's unique writing right there, I have to say. Okay, now we're in a new section. It's called On Reading and Writing. Of all that is written I love only what a man has written with his blood. Write with blood and you will experience that blood is spirit. So, again, you could take this the nihilistic occultic way, or you take this in the poetic way of putting your blood, sweat, and tears into something and really trying and making it as authentic as you can to your consciousness, and that those who read it will get the feeling from it, and they will then be able to understand your perspective better. I have had this experience with Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina book, where it's just fantastic. I've had that experience with a lot of Russian writers. And so when you read their book, you're like, oh, I connect with this, I vibe with this. You know, when I've read crappy books by Candace Owens, Tommy Lauren, you can tell that book is not from their brain, but rather they had a ghostwriter, editors, and it's an artificial, inauthentic, cliche, garbage book that isn't worth the money you spent. They didn't put their blood effort into it. There's a difference between really hardcore writers and then those who just write a book to write a book and then hire someone. There's like a split spirit within the book. I don't know how to describe it, but people who read a lot will definitely understand what I mean. And so he has a really cool way of encapsulating such a feeling right for us. It is not easily possible to understand the blood of another. I hate reading idlers. Whoever knows the reader will henceforth do nothing for the reader. Another century of readers and the spirit itself will stink. That's funny. The spirit itself will stink. Now what's unique about that one is, you know a spirit can't literally stink, right? But that it'll become putrid. You won't have this sort of sweetness that comes from it. Like, the same feeling you get when you smell a fresh cut rose or a jasmine flower, right? It's really interesting the way he's wording this. That everyone may learn to read, in the long run, corrupts not only writing but also thinking. Well. I don't agree with that, but let's see. Once the spirit was God, then he became man, and now he even becomes rabble. Now that's a jab at the Christians there. Because the spirit was God, then he became man. Jesus was a man, ate, walked on earth. So there's Christians who are not Trinitarians. There are Christians who are even saying maybe Jesus wasn't God on earth. And others say, no, Jesus is Lord, Jesus is God. And for us Muslims, we're like, no, he was just a human. It was not an angelic being, a demigod. But, you get into these little niche pockets of interpretation. But Nietzsche, pardon me, saying that the spirit was God, and then he became man, now he's even becomes a rabble. This shows you that God going into the body of a man is inferior, because man is inferior to God. And why would God limit himself into taking on the simplistic, weak form of a human being? Right? That's why for us Muslims, we call Allah the Most High. You cannot compare creation to Allah, and nothing in creation is comparable to him. And whatever befits his majesty is whatever befits his majesty. And we won't comprehend everything of his attributes, but we say Allah knows best, Allah and his messenger know best. We will see the features of Allah on Judgment Day if we've earned it. and be able to see Allah like we see the moon and stuff like that. But we have to understand that God is not man and man is not God. Very distinct thing here that he's mentioned, because if you can encapsulate God into a man, you've actually turned him into rabble. Because human beings are, matured monkeys, some would say. We have a special consciousness, we have gifts, but to say that God would reduce himself, the creator and sustainer of the cosmos, the one who created the brain of an ant, the hairs on a peach, the fibers all over leaves, the intestines of a cow, all that would then want to take the role of a pathetic human being who gets hung on a cross. Not that Jesus was pathetic, I mean as in the body of a human is pathetic. We are magnificent, but we are still weak, still vulnerable, very susceptible to the cold, to the heat. A rhino has thick skin. We cut very easily. And before antibiotics, we used to get infections and die more easily. Right? So, there's lots of ways you can look at this, but Nietzsche is a very sassy writer. He's punchy. And so when you read him, you don't get mad at first. You're kind of like, what is he saying here? And you got to look at it from multiple angles, and then you'll actually have a really good experience reading Nietzsche's work. So hopefully you had some fun, and have a good day.